I had always dreamed of owning my own home. After years of saving every penny and working overtime, I finally had the keys to a modest but beautiful house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The first 6 months were nothing short of perfection. I planted rose bushes along the front walkway. I restored the wooden fence in the backyard. I even installed a small fountain that created the most peaceful ambience during my morning coffee ritual. My neighbors were friendly but respectful of privacy. The street was clean and well-maintained. It was everything I had worked so hard to achieve. That peaceful existence came to an abrupt halt on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I was preparing dinner when I heard a firm knock at my front door. Standing on my porch was a man I had never seen before. He wore a navy blue polo shirt with an embroidered patch that read Neighborhood Compliance and carried a clipboard with official-looking papers. His posture was rigid, his expression stern. Something about him immediately put me on edge. "Good afternoon. I am representing the Homeowners Association for this district. We have received several complaints about your property," he said, his voice carrying an authoritative tone that seemed forced and unnatural. I frowned in confusion. I was not aware this neighborhood had an HOA. I do not recall signing any agreement when I purchased the house. His eyes narrowed slightly. "The HOA was established 3 months ago. All residents are automatically enrolled." He flipped through papers on his clipboard. "I need to inspect your backyard. We have reports of improper waste disposal and unapproved structural modifications." I stood firmly in my doorway, blocking his view inside. "I have made no modifications, and my waste is properly disposed of. I would like to see some identification or documentation about this HOA before allowing anyone into my property." The man's demeanor changed instantly. His face hardened and he took a step forward, almost as if trying to intimidate me with his proximity. "Listen, we can do this the easy way or the difficult way. I have the authority to issue fines that will make your head spin. Now step aside and let me inspect the property." I felt a chill run down my spine. This did not feel right. His badge looked cheaply made, and his uniform was just a basic polo that anyone could purchase. I stood my ground. "Please leave my property now. If there is legitimate HOA business, you can mail me the proper documentation." He scowled and scribbled something on his clipboard. "Fine. Here is your first violation notice. Failure to comply with HOA inspection. That will be $150 due within 7 days. He ripped off a paper and thrust it toward me. The citation looked like it had been printed on a home computer. No letterhead, no official seal, just a generic form with my address hastily written in. Over the next several days, different people claiming to be from the same HOA showed up at my door. Sometimes in the early morning, sometimes late in the evening. Each person had a different violation to cite, each more ridiculous than the last. My lawn was too green. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My garbage cans were visible from the street on non-collection days. None of my immediate neighbors mentioned anything about these inspections. When I casually asked Mrs. Wilson next door if the HOA had been giving her any trouble, she looked at me with genuine confusion. "What HOA? We have never had one in the 20 years I have lived here." That was when I knew something was seriously wrong. I called my cousin Marcus, who works in law enforcement in a neighboring county. As I described the situation, his casual tone shifted to one of serious concern. "Do not engage with them anymore," Marcus warned. "This sounds like a scam at best and something more sinister at worst. Start documenting everything. Times, descriptions, what they say. I have seen this pattern before and it is not good." The harassment escalated quickly. I started finding printed violation notices tucked under my windshield wiper, slipped into my mailbox, and even taped to my front door while I was at work. Each notice demanded payment for increasingly absurd infractions. One morning, I found a citation claiming I had excessive bird activity in my yard and owed $275 for wildlife disruption. Another demanded $350 for unapproved window treatments visible from street. The most ridiculous was a $500 fine for improper seasonal decorations, in the middle of June when I had no decorations up whatsoever. I gathered all these papers into a folder, documenting the date and time I received each one. The total fines had reached nearly $2,000 in just 2 weeks. If this was happening to anyone else in the neighborhood, they were keeping quiet about it. I decided to take a more proactive approach and contacted the city office directly. After being transferred between 3 different departments, I finally reached someone in residential zoning. "No, sir, there is no registered homeowners association for your subdivision," the clerk confirmed after checking their records. "If someone is claiming to represent an official HOA, they are misrepresenting themselves. Have they shown you any official documentation?" "Nothing beyond these citation notices," I replied, describing the flimsy papers I had been receiving. "Those sound completely fabricated," she said. "You should report this to the police. It could be a scam targeting homeowners." I thanked her and hung up, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. This was more than just annoying, it was deliberately deceptive. I called Marcus again to update him. "I do not like this at all," he said after I finished explaining. "This sounds like they are establishing a pattern, trying to make their presence seem normal. Keep your doors locked and do not open them for these people anymore." "Why would someone go to all this trouble?" I asked. "Best case, they are trying to scam you out of money. Worst case, they are casing your house, using fake authority to scope out your belongings and security situation." That night, I caught movement on my front lawn through the window. One of the HOA representatives, a tall man with a buzz cut I had seen twice before, was standing near my flower beds, taking photos of my house. When I flipped on the porch light, he quickly walked away, pretending to be checking other houses too. But I noticed he only photographed my property before getting into a white van parked down the street. The next day, I invested in security cameras, 4 exterior cameras covering all approaches to my house, and 1 indoor camera focused on the main living area. Marcus helped me set them up remotely so I could monitor my property from my phone. "Make sure you back up all footage to the cloud," he advised. "If they try anything, we will have evidence." The cameras proved their worth immediately. That very evening, they captured one of the fake HOA men peering into my side window, cupping his hands around his eyes to see through the blinds. I froze as I watched the footage in real time on my phone, feeling violated even though I was not home. As I pulled into my driveway later, my neighbor Mrs. Wilson hurried over from her yard. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before speaking in a hushed tone. "I saw that man in the blue shirt today," she whispered. "The one who keeps coming to your house. He was trying your garage door, checking if it would open. I called out to ask if he needed something, and he said he was doing perimeter compliance checks, whatever that means. He left quickly after that." I thanked her for the warning, my hands shaking slightly as I unlocked my front door. These were not just scammers looking for easy money. They were systematically testing my home's vulnerability. The fake HOA was just a cover for something much more invasive. That night, I enabled the motion alerts on all my cameras and slept with my phone by my pillow. Every notification made my heart race. Someone was watching my house, planning something, and using fake authority to do it. The question was no longer if they would make a move, but when. The imposters grew bolder by the day. They began arriving in a white van with magnetic signs reading Neighborhood Compliance Patrol hastily applied to the doors. Their polo shirts now matched, navy blue with embroidered badges that looked more official at first glance. They carried tablets instead of clipboards, trying to appear more legitimate. They expanded their territory too. I watched from my window as they approached other houses on my street, introducing themselves with the same authoritative posture they had used with me. Some neighbors, especially the newer residents, seemed to accept their presence without question. Others showed the same confusion I had initially felt. Marcus had been busy. Using his law enforcement connections, he ran the license plate from their van. "The vehicle is registered to a private security company called Safe Point Protection," he told me over the phone. "But here is the interesting part. The company was dissolved last year after multiple complaints of fraudulent practices. Someone is still using their name and equipment." "So they are just criminals with a cover story," I said. "Exactly, and they are getting more organized. This is not random. They are targeting your neighborhood systematically. The next time one of them approached my house, I was ready. I stood behind my door with my phone recording as he knocked. "I need to speak with the homeowner about serious compliance violations," he announced when I opened the door just enough to see him. "I would like to see some identification," I said firmly. He flashed a badge quickly, not giving me time to examine it. "Neighborhood Compliance Officer Johnson, we have issued multiple citations that remain unpaid. This is your final warning before legal action." I managed to capture his badge on video. When I zoomed in later, the text clearly read, "Private Property Enforcement." Nothing about an HOA or any official authority. "There is no HOA in this neighborhood," I stated. "I have confirmed this with the city. Who exactly do you represent?" His face darkened. "Listen, buddy, you can pay the fines now, or we can file a formal complaint that will put a lien on your house. Your choice." "I would like documentation of your authority to issue any fines or place any liens," I responded, continuing to record. He stepped forward aggressively. "You will regret being difficult about this. We have ways of dealing with non-compliant homeowners." The threat was thinly veiled. I closed and locked the door as he continued to knock loudly for several minutes before leaving. The next day, I found a printed notice on bright red paper tucked into my door frame. "Final notice. Pay all outstanding fines within 48 hours or property inspection and enforcement will commence without further warning." I took the notice directly to a lawyer Marcus had recommended. She examined it carefully, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "This has absolutely no legal standing," she confirmed. "No court order, no legal entity named, not even a proper signature. But that does not mean these people are not dangerous. This kind of impersonation often precedes more serious crimes." "What kind of crimes?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Home invasion, robbery, sometimes worse. They establish a pattern of authority, make neighbors used to seeing them around, then use that false legitimacy to gain access to homes." She handed me back the notice. "You should file a police report immediately." I did, but the officer who took my report seemed skeptical. "Without evidence of an actual crime being committed, there is not much we can do besides increased patrols in your area," he explained. "Suspicious activity and fake papers are concerning, but not enough for us to take action." I left the police station feeling frustrated but determined. If they needed evidence of an actual crime, that is exactly what I would give them. "We need to catch them in the act," Marcus said decisively after I told him about the police response. We were sitting in my living room, blinds drawn, speaking in hushed tones despite being alone. "Their escalation pattern suggests they are moving toward something bigger." "Like what?" I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. "Home invasion, possibly robbery." Marcus leaned forward, his expression grave. "These groups target specific houses, establish a pattern of intimidation, then strike when they think the homeowner is vulnerable or away." "So what do we do? Just wait for them to break in?" Marcus smiled for the first time in days. "Not exactly. We set a trap that gives them exactly what they want, an opportunity they cannot resist, while having the right people waiting for them." He explained his plan in detail. Marcus had remained close with several members of his old SWAT unit. They had dealt with similar scams before and were willing to help on their off days. The police needed evidence of an actual crime before they could act, so we would give them undeniable proof. "We need to make your house look temporarily vulnerable," Marcus explained. "Make them think you have left valuable items unsecured and that you will be gone for the evening." Over the next 2 days, we prepared meticulously. Additional cameras were installed in hidden locations throughout my house, covering every possible entry point. Marcus's former SWAT colleagues, 6 of them in total, mapped out positions where they could hide but maintain visual contact with all approaches to the property. "Remember, these guys are not professional criminals," one of the SWAT members explained to me. "They rely on intimidation and the appearance of authority. When confronted with actual authority, they typically surrender immediately." Friday evening was selected for the operation. I deliberately loaded visible boxes into my car throughout the afternoon, making sure the fake HOA members who had been driving by regularly would notice. The boxes were labeled with electronics brands and appeared valuable. I left my patio door unlocked with the security bar visibly absent. As dusk fell, I made a show of driving away. In reality, I circled the block and parked at my neighbor Mrs. Wilson's house, who was now fully aware of the situation and eager to help expose the scammers who had been terrorizing her street. I returned to my house through the back gate, where Marcus and his team were already in position. 3 officers were concealed in my shadowy backyard. 2 more were hidden in my garage. Marcus and I waited in the darkened kitchen, watching the security camera feeds on a tablet. "How certain are you that they will come tonight?" I whispered. "Almost guaranteed," Marcus replied. "They have been escalating, testing boundaries. The red notice was their way of saying they are ready to move, and we just showed them a house full of valuables with the owner conveniently away for the evening." We waited in silence for nearly 3 hours. Just as I was beginning to think we had miscalculated, the tablet lit up with movement at the street. A white van with the lights off coasted slowly down the road, engine barely audible. It passed my house once, turned around at the end of the block, then parked 2 houses down. My heart raced as I watched 3 figures exit the vehicle. They moved with purpose now, no pretense of official inspection. They wore dark clothing and carried backpacks. One had what looked like a crowbar partially concealed along his leg. They split up at my front yard. One headed toward the back of the house while 2 approached the front door. Through the cameras, we could hear them checking windows, testing for unlocked entry points. "Just like we thought," Marcus whispered. "This was never about an HOA, this was always heading toward a break-in." The crackle of radio communication confirmed his team was tracking all 3 suspects. We waited, barely breathing, as the trap we had so carefully laid was about to spring shut. The sound of glass breaking cut through the silence. I flinched instinctively, but Marcus placed a steady hand on my shoulder. On the tablet, we could see one of the men had used a tool to crack the sliding door lock, breaking part of the frame in the process. He slid the door open quietly, then signaled to his companions. All 3 converged on my back patio, their flashlights creating eerie beams through my kitchen window. I crouched lower behind the counter, heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. Marcus and I had moved to a concealed position in the hallway, giving us a clear view of the living room while keeping us hidden from the intruders. "Remember, stay absolutely still," Marcus whispered. "Let them get all the way inside before the team moves." The back door slid open with a soft scraping sound. The first man entered cautiously, sweeping his flashlight across my kitchen. The beam passed within inches of our hiding spot but did not reveal us. The second man followed, carrying a duffel bag that clinked with what sounded like tools. The third man, taller than the others and clearly the leader, entered last. "Check upstairs first," the leader whispered harshly. "Bedrooms usually have the good stuff. Electronics in the living room, be quick." As they moved deeper into my house, Marcus raised his radio and whispered a single word: "Execute." What happened next unfolded with military precision. From the shadows of my backyard, 3 SWAT officers moved silently through the still-open patio door. From the connected garage, 2 more emerged. Within seconds, they had surrounded the intruders in my living room. "Police, do not move. Hands where we can see them." The commands echoed through my house with thunderous authority. The intruders froze in shock. 2 immediately raised their hands, their flashlights clattering to the floor. But the leader made a desperate dash toward the front door. He made it 3 steps before being tackled by one of the officers. They crashed into my coffee table, shattering the glass top as the man was expertly subdued and handcuffed. Lights flooded the room as Marcus flipped the switches. The 3 men who had terrorized me for weeks were now face down on my floor, surrounded by real authority. The contrast between their fake badges and the genuine police presence was striking. "I am an officer conducting a legitimate inspection," the leader shouted, still struggling against his restraints. "This is official HOA business." One of the SWAT members snorted in derision. "Save it. We have been monitoring you for weeks. Your HOA does not exist." Within minutes, police cruisers arrived with lights flashing. The officers who had dismissed my earlier complaints now moved with urgent professionalism as they took custody of the three men. They collected evidence methodically: the fake badges, the tools used to break in, the duffel bags they had brought to carry away my belongings. One officer pulled me aside after taking my statement. "You were smart not to confront them directly," he said seriously. "We have been tracking a group matching this description across 3 counties. They typically target single occupants, using intimidation tactics before robbing the homes." As they led the 3 men to separate patrol cars, I caught the eye of the leader, the same man who had first knocked on my door weeks ago. His face was a mask of anger and humiliation. The false authority he had wielded so confidently had crumbled in the face of real law enforcement. "You picked the wrong house," I said quietly as he was guided past me. He said nothing, but his glare spoke volumes. His perfect scam had been unraveled by the cousin of his intended victim, a cousin with connections he never saw coming. The legal process that followed was unexpectedly swift. The evidence against the 3 men was overwhelming. My meticulous documentation, combined with the security footage and the eyewitness accounts from both the SWAT team and responding officers, created an airtight case. The district attorney was particularly interested in pursuing maximum charges, as similar scams had been reported throughout the county. I found myself in an imposing courthouse 3 weeks after the arrest, prepared to testify about the weeks of harassment I had endured. Marcus sat beside me in the witness waiting area, reviewing key points of my testimony. "Just stick to the facts," he advised. "Dates, times, exact wording of threats. The security footage will do the rest of the talking." When I entered the courtroom, I was surprised to see several of my neighbors in attendance. Mrs. Wilson gave me an encouraging nod. The community had rallied once they understood what had been happening on our street. The 3 defendants sat at the defense table, looking significantly less intimidating in orange jumpsuits than they had in their fake uniforms. Their lawyer, a harried-looking public defender, shuffled papers nervously. I took the stand and recounted everything chronologically: the first unexpected knock, the escalating threats, the fraudulent citations, and ultimately the break-in. The prosecutor displayed my security footage on a large screen, showing the defendants clearly casing my house, peering in windows, and finally breaking in with tools. "And at any point, did you agree to join an HOA or authorize these individuals to inspect your property?" the prosecutor asked. "No, I repeatedly asked for proper identification and documentation, which they never provided," I testified. The defense strategy quickly became clear and desperate. Their attorney argued that the men were operating a legitimate neighborhood security collective, that homeowners could voluntarily join for protection services. "My clients were simply enforcing the standards this collective had established," the defense attorney claimed. There was a misunderstanding about the defendants' participation. The judge, an older woman with steely eyes, was having none of it. "Are you suggesting that breaking into someone's home at night with tools and flashlights is part of your client's normal security service?" she asked incredulously. When the defendants took the stand, their stories contradicted each other. The leader claimed they were conducting a legitimate inspection for violations. Another said they were investigating reports of break-ins in the neighborhood. The third, visibly nervous, admitted they were looking for valuables but insisted they believed the house was abandoned. After 3 days of testimony, the judge delivered her verdict and sentencing in the same session. Her voice was sharp with controlled anger. "What you have done is not just breaking and entering, not just attempted theft. You systematically terrorized a homeowner under the guise of false authority. You exploited people's natural tendency to comply with official-seeming requests. You undermined the legitimate institutions that keep our communities safe." The sentences were substantial. The leader received 8 years for orchestrating the scheme, with additional time for prior offenses that were uncovered during the investigation. The others received 5 years each. All three were ordered to pay restitution for damages to my home and for the psychological impact of their harassment. As the bailiff led them away, the leader turned to glare at me one final time. But the intimidation that had once radiated from him was gone, replaced by the impotent anger of someone whose power had been exposed as nothing but a cheap facade. Outside the courthouse, several neighbors approached to thank me. An elderly couple admitted they had paid nearly $500 in fake fines before realizing the scam. A young mother confessed she had been too frightened to question the men when they inspected her backyard, fearing retaliation. "You did what many of us were afraid to do," Mrs. Wilson said, squeezing my hand. "You stood up to them." The city's fraud investigation unit used my case to issue a community-wide warning about HOA scams. They established a verification system for legitimate neighborhood associations and held information sessions on spotting imposters. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lifting. The people who had made me feel unsafe in my own home were facing justice. The community was stronger and more vigilant, and I had discovered my own capacity to stand firm when intimidated with a little help from the right connections. It took several weeks for my house to feel like home again. The sliding door had been repaired, the broken coffee table replaced, but the psychological impact lingered. I would still tense at unexpected knocks. The sound of a car slowing near my driveway could send my heart racing. Home had been my sanctuary, my achievement, my safe place, and those men had tainted that feeling. Marcus visited often during those first weeks, sometimes bringing members of his SWAT team who had participated in the operation. They helped install a comprehensive security system, far beyond the cameras I had initially set up. Motion sensors, glass break alarms, reinforced locks, professional-grade equipment that would make any real criminal think twice. "This house is now more secure than most banks," one of the officers joked as they finished the installation. What started as security consultations evolved into friendship. These officers, who had risked their safety for a stranger simply because my cousin had asked, became regular visitors. Weekend barbecues in my backyard replaced the tense stakeouts of months before. The neighborhood itself underwent a transformation. What the fake HOA had tried to impose through fear, the community now created through genuine cooperation. We established a legitimate neighborhood watch program with transparent leadership and clear guidelines. Monthly meetings rotated between houses, building connections that made our streets stronger and truly safer. Mrs. Wilson, who had warned me about the suspicious men checking my garage, was elected as the watch coordinator. "No fake badges needed," she announced at our first official meeting, drawing laughter from everyone who had been affected by the scam. One sunny Saturday morning, a delivery truck pulled up to my house. The driver unloaded a small but sturdy yard sign and an envelope. The package had no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably Marcus's. The sign was simple but powerful, a shield emblem with the words "protected by real law" emblazoned beneath it. The accompanying note read, "So no one ever mistakes your house for an easy target again. Your cousin and his friends." I planted the sign prominently near my front gate that afternoon. It was not meant as a threat, but as a declaration. This home and this community now stood vigilant against those who would abuse authority or prey on others' good faith. That evening, Marcus came over for dinner. We sat on my back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and purples. The fountain I had installed during those first happy months bubbled peacefully. "Do you regret buying this place?" Marcus asked, gesturing around at my home. "After everything that happened." I considered the question carefully, looking at my garden where SWAT officers had once hidden, at my patio door where criminals had broken in. But I also saw the roses blooming along the walkway, the wind chimes swaying gently in the breeze, the comfortable space I had created for myself. "Not for a second," I answered truthfully. "They tried to take this place from me not just physically but emotionally, making me feel unsafe, unwelcome in my own home. If I had given that up, they would have one regardless of their prison sentences." Marcus nodded approvingly. "You know the biggest mistake they made, besides tangling with my cousin." What's that? They thought authority comes from a uniform, a clipboard, a stern voice. Real authority comes from community, from connection, from actually caring about the people and places you protect. He raised his glass. To real authority. I raised mine in return, and to trusting your instincts. As night fell and lights came on across the neighborhood, I felt a profound sense of peace. The locks on my doors were stronger now, but so was I. I had faced intimidation and stood my ground. I had reached out for help when needed. And most importantly, I had reclaimed my home, my sanctuary. Not even the memory of those imposters could take that away.